All right, we're going to take and pray and get started with the everybody's most fun meeting, training, what have you, of the child abuse prevention policy training. I say that completely, tongue in cheek, tongue through cheek. This is nobody's favorite thing to do. So, anyway, we'll just get started. Let's just commit this time. Lord, I just pray that you would take and use this time so that we can train and be aware, be wise to the points and the concerns that we can do a good job, not only in training these kids about Christ, Lord, but also to the best of our abilities to keep them safe as well. Lord, I pray these things in your name. Amen. So, you'll see a lot of the little landmark ministry protection sign up there. That's just who we got the slideshow from, because I am too lazy to actually make a PowerPoint myself, plus transferring different things. So, other than using their materials in this. So we're going to come to our child abuse prevention policy training session. So if we go to the next slide here, obviously welcome. Thank you guys for showing up. When we come up to the next slide here, this is an important part to talk about. This is not an insurance policy workshop. A lot of people think when they hear child abuse prevention policy, they think insurance. Why? Because insurance companies, in fact, I think even this landmark ministry protection group there that put this all together, a lot of this is put together by insurance, but we don't do it because there's an insurance statement about it. One of the reasons why they're put in the forefront of some of these things is they see the wreckage, what happens after all of these things. So they have seen more cases of what this might look like than pretty much anybody else. They've seen the loss. Now, what loss do insurance companies by nature focus on? If we go to the next click through here, they look at money. How much is it going to cost if something breaks? That's the biggest point of insurance. If you've ever had it, then it's like, they're going to adjust and value. They deal in dollars and cents because that's what they can deal with. For us, when we look at the potential of a loss, it's much more than that. All right, one more point there. For our church, what happens if something like this happens? There's pain, suffering, different emotions, trauma, fear, anger, loss of trust, loss of witness in the community, etc., 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 and also to those kids themselves. If it was just about money, we can pay any amount of money that we need to. We can figure that out. But because we are witnesses of Christ, we take and have a higher calling than just that. If you look on your child abuse prevention policy, section 1, the purposes, is to protect children from physical, emotional, or sexual abuse as defined by the laws of the state of Arizona in the church. B, yes, to protect the congregation and the church from legal liability. To protect victims and their families with a sincere commitment to their spiritual and emotional well-being. One of the reasons we don't want these things to happen is because it will mess people up. And to provide transparency and openness within the community, while at the same time guarding privacy for individuals. One of the reasons why we have an open seat is the fact that parents can be, guardians can be, there within, the children's ministries, things and all like that, because we're not doing anything in secret. Exactly how things go. So this is about more than just the physical cost of a loss, but it's about all these other things. These are the reasons why we don't want this to happen. One more slide. One more yet, again. There are a couple of verses here. The biggest that I like in this is 1 Peter 5:8. It says, Satan is going about looking for opportunities of who he may devour. That's actually 1 Peter 5:8. If we were to take and look that up here and read it, it says that your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. There is danger out there, not just for children, but also because, there's evil from and resistance to doing things well. So what this really is, if we go on another couple clicks here, I'll stop you when we get there. This is a Deny Satan Opportunities workshop. This is a deny the opportunities for someone for this to ever happen. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about how we react to it when it does happen, but our goal is for it to not have an opportunity for it to happen. That's why we take a lot of these things very seriously. Next slide. Take and go through these bits here. Okay, how do we accomplish this? First off and foremost, we are trying to prevent the occurrence of the abuse in the first place. An ounce of cure is worth an ounce of prevention is worth a gallon of cure. We want to be in a spot where it just can't happen unless something, so as much as we're possible. Again, to pray, this is not just a mechanical thing. We do these things. This is also a spiritual battle, a spiritual point. Prayer is integral to that. Taking ownership of the safety of our ministry. When we put on a children's event and we're here as a church, as a ministry, that we're taking ownership of what we do, how we do it, is safe, and we've thought about it. A verse that comes to mind for this is Deuteronomy 29:29. It says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and our sons forever, that we may observe all the words of this law. There are some things that we can't possibly prevent. There are some things we can't know. We pray, we trust the Lord for those things, but everything that we can know, everything that we can do, we should be doing. So that's where we come down to this last part, learn ways to prevent avoidable occurrences. How do we avoid these things? Next slide. One more. Sexual misconduct. We're going to take and talk about that, what this means. And we're going to talk about the youth activities that we have and security, how we deal with these things. We've got to talk about sexual misconduct, how it happens, some of these different things, because it's we can't say it doesn't happen. The worst thing we can say is it can never happen here. We go on to the next slide. got a fancy one. In church sexual misconduct, one more slide. By definition, anything that an adult does with a minor to obtain sexual gratification, regardless of the willingness of the minor. It doesn't matter if the minor is 100% willing, it is illegal. So, again, there are so many things that can go into this. Inappropriate touching, inappropriate stories, films, video, providing of pornography. Any of these things that exist, they're part of this. So, and again, it doesn't matter if, well, as we see all the different cases happening within schools, you'll have this whole thing of, well, you had a a 16, 17-year-old minor student, he gets into a sexual misconduct point with a teacher, and people say, wow, that guy really won it. But who gets in trouble? It's still the teacher, because they're not supposed to do that. They know better. It's still not legal. In fact, in the state of Arizona, propositioning a minor can be a legal offense. So, yeah, you can't even really talk about it, even in a joking way. This gets especially hard as you get on to, the kids that are 16, 17. We know they're out in the schools and everything like that in the world. This is a huge thing. They're going to want to joke around about it. We can't, because whether they're willing parties or not, it's still considered misconduct. Next slide. Next one. We're going to do this in the problem and the protection ways. So we'll just hit all of these bullet notes up here, Sean. All right. We said the whole thing, it can't happen here. These statistics are a couple years old. It may actually be higher now. These things usually don't get better. I mean, they don't. 40 million Americans, 1 in 6, has been sexually abused as a child. Now, what does that mean when we really think that through? We have 7 people here. So odds are, in 7 individuals here, that if you look around, 1 in 6 sexually abused as a child. So, and it happens many different places. They just had the largest payment out in the history of the United States for a sexual misconduct case. Came out of the Los Angeles County Juvenile detention system. Over $5 billion that the county, because it had gone on for probably 20 years. So 1 in 100 ministries will have a misconduct claim. That's a really low amount, but it's still way too much, but that's 1 in 100. It says 1 in 5 will have some kind of severe misconduct allegation. Now you notice the allegation is higher than the actual claim. The claim is one that's gone through the court system and is actually, there's proof positive, there has to be a payout on that, or some sort of 1 in 5 is an allegation. Something was in that church or ministry that allowed for an allegation. Doesn't mean it happened, but whatever they had in there was a place where it could have happened. Part of this is making sure that we can say, no, that couldn't possibly have happened, that there's always accountability that way. Next thing that's this is surprising to many people. 1 in 5 of all sexual predators in ministries are 18 or younger. Now, we require this for those who are 18 and older, but child-on-child issues, again, it's 20% of it being what we would consider child-on-child. Usually older against younger, but this is why we have supervision at all times. Is because it's not just about the workers, it's about the other kids. Again. So these are pretty depressing statistics about this problem, but it's a very real problem. Again, with those types of numbers. All right, we're going to take a look at the, I think go back one slide. Okay. We're going to look at molesters so that we can see them. We're going to look at the behavioral patterns and the profiles of different molesters. There's no different profile, but there are certain things that are red flags of, wait a second, this person is doing these things. This doesn't compute. Why is this happening? There are things that just might not seem right. So we have to kind of look through that of how do we spot this? Because why do molesters get away with it again and again and again, those that are serial or predatory molesters? It's because they're very good at appearing harmless in most situations. But there's usually just one or two things that are like, those don't quite look right. And a lot of times people, they like, quite honestly, molesters in this context, in their public context, are usually some of the nicest people you know. Why? Because that's their cover. They want it when somebody says something that's, wow, this doesn't quite seem right, that you're like, well, yeah, but it couldn't possibly be that person, because they're this really nice person. So we'll look at what those things. Doesn't mean that if you have one that you necessarily are, but it's one of those things of we need to not take care of that. Again, just also understanding molesters, they're attracted to places where there are children, that there are minors. They don't go places where there are older people, necessarily. They go where the kids are. Schools, churches, youth sports, all these different things. They go where there is. One of the interesting things, one of those red flags, is if someone only wants to be around the kids, and they are not interested necessarily in connecting with the other adults, that's one of the things that you look for. If they only are around the kids and they don't want to interact with any of the other adults, now does that mean they're a molester? No. But that's not normal behavior if they're attracted only to do children's things. Next up, 2 types of molesters. The predatory, or also called preferential molester. There aren't as many of these ones. We'll go back. But we'll talk about them a little bit. One more forward. Sorry, we're getting our... And then we'll just hit those 2 bullet points. All right. These are the predatory or preferential molesters. There aren't as many as these as there are what we'll call situational molesters, but there's more victims. These are the people who have a plan, and they appear to be ideal workers. These are the ones that they're really the most insidious. They look like they're excited about all the kids' things all the time. I mean, they'll be there early, they'll help, they'll clean up, they'll do all the things in order to alleviate suspicion. They want to build trust. One of the people that they're building trust with is the gatekeepers, the people who are supposed to be watching for molesters. So, knowing this, this is why we go through our policies without making exceptions to the policy. So a little bit like I take a picture of when I did lockout, tagout at the industrial plant. Lockout, tagout is if you're going to work on a piece of equipment that has electrical energy, gravity, it's going to fall on you if something comes out, steam, whatever. It has a potential to have an issue. You're working on a piece of equipment. You never took somebody's word that said that that equipment's not going to hurt me. You had your own lock, you had the only key for it, and it had a tag with your name. You put it on where that energy was. You locked it out. You couldn't turn it on. It was kind of weird because it's like you trust no one. It's a little bit of the same thing. No one do we trust and to get a free pass. It's because of these predatory or preferential molesters. We always have to stay vigilant that way. Again, these are the ones that you hear about. One person comes forward, two people come forward, but then you find out they've got like 30 other victims that didn't end up coming forward, but nobody knew. They work at gaining trust. Next. Yes. All right, hang on. Okay. It's a good question. I didn't get the microphone out. The question is, can I define what I mean by preferential? Predatory or preferential molesters, they prefer typically a certain age group or gender that they're going to target. Like, you could have a preferential molester who likes boys between the age of 6 and 10. We'll just take and use that as a point. This is one of the things that you can see. If they pour into kids, these young boys from 6 to 10, when they reach 11 or 12, boom, they don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. That can be a red sign, a red flag that way. So it's those things that, because usually if you poured into somebody for 4 years, they don't just magically get a little bit older and then you don't want to have anything to do with them. But you see that if they move on. And so you can have it, sometimes it's, I said 6 to 10-year-old boys, but whatever it is, you'll see that they only work within this one age group, or they only seem to connect with this one age group. Again, not normal. Now, you'll always have someone who's best at a certain age group. In my case, when I was a counselor at camp for 9 weeks, you have different age groups, anywhere from 3rd through 5th graders to high schoolers. Now, there were some age groups where, I could really connect with these kids. There are certain age groups that, especially the high schoolers, I didn't connect with them as much. Although some of them talked to me and said they liked me, because they were like, well, yeah, you're not going to take, when they were with you, they knew I wasn't going to take and get them in trouble by doing something that they weren't supposed to do. They liked being around me. I wasn't as comfortable with them. But I still did all 9 weeks of camp, whether it was 3rd through 5th or 10 through 12th. If you had somebody that came to that camp and said, wow, I know you normally do all these different age groups. I only want to come for this age group. This would be a red flag of why only this age group. Okay. Situational molesters. Says more but fewer. There are more situational molesters than there are predatory molesters. But there are usually fewer victims because situational molesters, they're not going out there to try and groom somebody. They're just sitting and saying, wow, nobody's looking. Oh, this might be interesting. Hey, there's an opportunity. So they don't groom someone over a long period of time, but they're just like, they might be, again, terribly sexually immoral people, but they didn't actually go and plan that they're going to have this thing happen. They just are like, hey, nobody's looking right now. Why not? So they don't have these huge risks because those situations, ideally, do not pop up all that often. It's not necessarily pre-planned. They just respond to the situation. In the one hand, these are more preventable because these people aren't out to try and trick you. In other words, they're not out there actively attempting to slide under the radar. But it is more preventable because we can avoid having situations where there's this higher risk. This is where things like our two-person rule, the two-adult rule, exist. Where it says it's the goal that this is in our policy, the minimum of 2 unrelated adults. When it says unrelated, probably could read unmarried because there are legal restrictions on who can be compelled to testify or not testify for people who are married in court. You cannot compel someone to testify against their spouse on something that they just heard that they did. Now, someone can choose to testify against something that they have actually seen, but there are rules about, so that's why we have the 2 adult rules, and they're not related. They're not husband and wife. It says, will be in attendance at all times when children are being supervised during programs or activities. In those situations where there is only one adult teacher in attendance during the class, session, or youth, the door of the classroom must remain open, and there should be no fewer than 3 students with the adult teacher. This is really hard to take and do, and we're in our size, because oftentimes we'll have a time when we'll have only one teacher in our Sunday school class. But that's the reason why, as much as possible, that door in the kitchen, through the kitchen, that whole area, all of that's open. You'll notice that there are, as much as we can make it in that room, there are no places where someone can remain hidden. So even when we have in the nursery, it's not ideal, but you have that great big window. So that there's not that isolation, so that it can be checked out on. But ideally, we need people to just be there. This is where we talk about people who are just eyes. We need to have that accountability that way. Children are not to be left alone with one adult unless they are in a counseling situation. This is a little bit like, so when we go into our Awana program and we are working with the kids individually, we don't have 2 adults at each station. We move, but we're around this room. And this is also why I have adults up against the wall, kids not. So that every adult that's around here, you may not be specifically but you can see every other adult from where you're sitting. Because we realize discipleship happens best one-on-one. Where people have a relationship with an adult or with a mentor that way. That's the best way it happens. But we can't just have someone go off to a room with a kid all alone. So we do the best that we can. We take and put them in an area where there are more than... now, ideally, if we had enough adults, we could split up into 2 different rooms. You have 2 adults in one room, 2 adults in the other, and it spreads out, because I know it can get a little bit crowded in here when you've got somebody over there, somebody over there, somebody over there, somebody over there, and it's distracting. One of the reasons we do it the way we do it, there's just not that makes it normal for the kids, and we don't have enough adults all the time to have 2 in each side. So that's just where we've done that. But if we had 4 adults that we could take and count on, yeah, we could, that we're going to be there, we could take and split it. Usually we have 3. We don't necessarily always have 4. So it says also, children are not to be left unsupervised during a class period. Situational molesters. We talked about that child-on-child thing. Yeah, we can't let the kids just all be there by the kids, because something could happen there. They say, oh, they're all good, they're fine. No, we have to, when we do chili cook-off, we end up needing, as much as possible, to have somebody out at the fire or out on that back playground at all times. So if, a couple of kids went out towards that, back area, they can still be seen. We put an enormous amount of twinkle lights out there and all like that, so that even if you're inside, you can see out the windows to anybody that's back on the playground. We need to make sure that, again, there are a lot of things that we can do. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit back to the predatory molesters, the preferential molesters. One of our planks for that is the fact that we have the criminal background checks, which everybody here has done. Which criminal background checks, they're required. They are standard of what needs to be done. But again, they at least keep anybody who's already had a conviction out. But we have the two adult rule, because yeah, there are people who could pass a background check, but are not. Other things like 6-month rule that we have to have known the person for 6 months, seen them over a time period, see if they are indeed competent and trustworthy enough. None of these things are foolproof against the preferential and the predatory. But the situational, we can really weed out. All right, let's keep on moving on before I take them. We'll go past this whole slide. Again, we can't assume that our church isn't vulnerable. It says 1 in 5. So I know 5 churches in our valley. Actually, I know more than 5. I do know of at least one that had a sexual molestation claim and issue. Wasn't in our town. It was up in Wilcox. There was a church in our valley that had this. I don't know all of the specifics. So we think this is a big church problem. This is a problem for, city churches. No, it can happen right here. So we have to do all these things. Next slide. Reporting obligations. I'll open up for questions as soon as we get done with reporting obligations. Follow the church reporting procedure. So we have a procedure that if we expect or think that there is a suspected abuse or neglect, it's going to be reported as mandated by state law. And everybody that is needed is notified. This is just if we think that, okay, so a child comes in to our classroom, to our class, to our Awana. This child is always covered in bruises. And you're like, no kid is quite this clumsy. Or, you know what? They come up and they say something might have happened. Or, you know what? I've got this, I don't know, odd or crazy uncle, Billy Bob. We'll take a say Billy Bob, whatever. And when he comes and, you know, how he touches, how he plays with me, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. If we think that something might be going on, we are mandated to report that to authorities. Arizona law, we are what is called mandatory reporters, which is anyone who has children in their care that are not their own. So this is where school teachers are mandatory reporters, coaches in youth leagues, they're considered mandatory reporters. Is us, we're considered mandatory reporters. We're not mandatory investigators, but we are mandatory reporters. We don't have the capability and the understanding to conduct an investigation into this, but we have to take and report it. And again, there's a whole other set of things where if we think that something's happened here, we have to let the parent and guardian know immediately. We cannot use that person with the allegation. They have to be not working with children pending the investigation. And of course it says we've got to take and do the insurance company so that they can take and say, yeah, no, you need to do this, this, and this because this is what happened over here. And they didn't do this, and they should have, and then bad things happened. We need to respond to law enforcement, be Cochise County Sheriff and or the CPS, Arizona CPS. We're mandatory reporters. We don't get a choice. And church leadership, anybody else needs to be set up. Again, in the event that it did occur, you immediately remove that person from any position involving contact with children and youth. If it did occur, whether or not they've actually been sentenced, whether or not they had a plea bargain issue, they're not used in children's ministry again. Doesn't mean that they're out of all ministry, but that gets sticky. So we have to follow our own regulations with that, and we have to follow the state regulations with that. Any questions about what our obligations are of reporting?
So is it mandated reporting only in the church setting or in any setting?
So we are mandatory reporters for children that come under our care at the church. So the children that are in our care. So, so if you're volunteering here and a child comes to Awana or VBS and tells you something, or it's that child there, then we're mandatory reporters. So if you just go visit somebody's house, not in official function, you're not technically a mandatory reporter. I would say, this is my personal opinion, not the mandatory reporter, to err on the side of reporting if you have a credible reason to believe so. But again, as far as the law states, we can only report what we know about of somebody that comes here or says something here. As far as our mandatory reporting, you can take and report, you can call 1-800 or 188 SOS Child, Arizona CPS, even not, just as a private citizen, but you're not required to. Or you're only required to be a mandatory reporter if they're coming into the church. Let me get that back to you, Joy.
So my question is, if you hear something questionable about a child talking about, and when I say questionable, a child, something happened to them at school from another child, is that something you should be reporting?
So I'll just go back up here so I'm on camera. If it's within the context of your ministry function as a volunteer at the church, then it's a mandatory reporting. If you think that if you have reason to believe something, that's more of a mandatory report where everybody that falls under that first point of in section 4 where it says suspected abuse or neglect under his or her care, it will be reported to them. So it doesn't have to happen here. Again, there is a fine line of wiggle room of if you are, so technically, if you're not on duty on the clock, you have as I understand it, you'd have to look up more legally. You have some leeway of whether you're required to. You can defer to your own judgment. If it happens while they're in the care, this is where then it's a mandatory reporting. We have to pass that along. So if you are told it while they are officially part of a club or an Awana kind of thing, if it's something that said, so say after we've released children to their guardians, okay, technically they're under their guardian's care right now, you are no longer officially on duty. You can use your own judgment. If it's still within that time, our judgment and leeway is significantly restricted. So, yeah, it's a tough thing. Because what I would like to say is that if you have understanding that there is that there is abuse going on, I would have to err on the side of it always being reported. Now, again, but there's what should be done or what could be done and what we're required to do legally. And those are two different things.
Okay, I'm going to repeat it back to make sure I understand it.
Please do.
We've clocked in. We're running VBS.
Mhm.
During VBS, a kid tells you how their day at school went, and it involved some form of abuse from another student. We have to report that.
Yes.
Sunday morning, the child is here telling you how their week went. You're not in class. It's just passing through the kitchen. They tell you something happened at school. You're not legally required to report that.
Correct.
So it is only if you're informed or find out or
Right.
whatever while officially being their temporary guardian in that situation.
Right. Now, yes,
That's the legal requirement.
that is the legal requirement as I understand the law. Again, should it be reported? Probably, but it's not a mandatory reporting according to Arizona state law.
I now have a question regarding
Okay?
this. Okay. When there's some kind of abuse or whatever, in point 1 of section 4, it says the parent or guardian will be notified immediately. What if they're telling you it's their parent or their guardian?
So there's two different things. There's in the event of just you become aware of suspected abuse or neglect. Number one, where the parent or guardian of the child will be informed immediately, is under in the event that an incident of abuse or neglect is alleged to have occurred at the church.
Okay, so,
So if it
they're telling
happens
on their
here,
family, you just call
while
them?
they're under our care, then the parent or guardian is notified immediately. We don't have that requirement for reporting if it's in that first event, because you might find somebody that says, yeah, my parent or guardian, you know what, they beat me. And all these other different things. Well, obviously, at that point, you're going to inform the authorities. You're going to inform the church. You're not going to inform the abuser in that case. You'll wait and let the authorities handle that one. Joy's got the microphone behind you, or wants the microphone. I don't know if she wants the microphone, but it's...
Yeah, I don't want the microphone, but I'll still, just for purposes of anybody who needs to hear the question. So another thing on reporting, the question is if you are a children's ministry worker in, like, say, VBS or Awanas or something, and you hear something that you feel needs to be reported, could it count if you went to the ministry leader that is over you as reporting it, or do you have to go straight to the authorities?
So if it is... this is one of those cases that I've not specifically considered. But typically speaking, the person who actually heard it from the child would have to be the one reporting to authorities, because it doesn't do any good if I were to take and say, we'll just say, Cochise County Sheriff's Office or Arizona CPS, you know what? My leader told me that the child told them that this occurred. All I am is I'm like, I believe the technical term is hearsay evidence in a court. So, yeah, there is that other reporting involved. If authorities are involved, it ends up having to come to be the person that actually heard something go on or heard from the child. It also can't be, for instance, if someone tells you, okay, so if James, child in your care, tells you about something at school, so James says that Joe at his school says that his parent hits him. We can't report that now as private citizens because we didn't hear it from Joe. We heard it from James, who heard it from Joe down the line. There's a limit to what we can. This is why cases of child abuse can be hard to prosecute because some of the witnesses back and forth might be secondhand, third hand. This is also why you sometimes hear about child abuse happening as a child kind of a thing, and you hear about it coming out 10, 15 years later. You know, when that child is an adult and they're understanding everything, because other people may or may not have suspected, but if they were never able to take and have that from the child, it's very, and it's not necessarily right in that sense that has to happen, but unfortunately that's the way the legal system works, is it has to come from a primary source. Again, this is also why in most states you'll see the statute of limitations on when it can be reported being extended out in many cases indefinitely. Used to be, well, if you didn't report it in 5 years or 5 months or what have you, nothing could be done. In many states now, doesn't matter. It could have happened 20, 30 years ago. You can report it and it can be actionable. And they made that retroactive in many of these different states. Understanding that sometimes this isn't reported until the child themselves is an adult. It could be, yeah, there's a reason why those things have happened, because the limited ability of what we can and can't report and work through the court system. Again, yes. You can ask them questions to determine, because again, that's where it comes down to a reasonable suspicion of abuse. You can't ask questions to clarify, to take and see what do they mean by this. You know, oh, they hit me all the time. Or are they taking it as playing a friendly game of, you know, slug bug in the back of the car, so to speak, and they're, you know, it's part of the playful thing, and they're just a little bit rougher than somebody else, but it's not specifically abuse. You might need to know that before you take and talk to Cochise County Sheriff, because you don't want to be the person that cries wolf. Yeah, you can ask some questions. But the burden of proof for reporting is higher then you're not engaging in a full-blown investigation. If you think it needs to go to that level, that's where you involve law enforcement, CPS, because they are trained to deal with these situations. Case in point of this ministries have gotten in trouble for conducting their own internal investigations, where they determined, oh, no, this wasn't truly actually credible, but it actually was. Again, we are not trained investigators to understand the legalities, what's legal, what's not, and no one's expecting you to be. But if you have reason to believe that abuse or neglect has happened to a child that comes in your care, it needs to be reported, so that someone with the capabilities to do so can investigate it. Yes. Oh, that's right. Microphone. I should just leave the microphone with you.
Okay, with deciding whether or not you have a reasonable, what is it called, suspicion or whatever, is that allowed to be something that you ponder and think on for, say, a couple of weeks, to have a longer conversation of like, remember when you told me that? What did you mean by that? Like things of that nature. Because especially with kids ministry, you're running around a lot, you're moving from one situation to the next a lot, and it may take more than one conversation over the course of more than 1 week to actually know what they're talking about. Is that allowed, or do you have to pull them aside and be like, we have to have this really weird conversation right now? How do you do that?
I would say that would be allowable, of it coming up on another, situation to have insurance. Because we know that the statute of limitations will not go away on that abuse. So it's not like someone's going to get off, it's going to run out of time. We wouldn't want to do it inevitably, but it also does make sure that the child is recording something that's relatable, memorable, that they can consistently tell this story, over more than 1 week, or more than one passing comment. That would be helpful for the eventual investigation, because if the child's story remains consistent over 2 weeks, or potentially 3, and doesn't change, then you know that there's something there. You may not know exactly what it is, but there's something there, consistently. So I would say, yeah, you would be able to take more than one conversation with the child. If you're not clear the first time. Where somebody said this was something that is suspect. Again.
Is that where we could consult leadership within the church of saying, I need to ask follow-up questions about this kid?
Right. This
And
is
have
where
basically that sounding
you're
board.
notifying the rest of your ministry leaders, board of the church, all these other things as well at that point in time. You can, work through counsel on something like that.
Because I know, especially if you come with your own anxiety or whatever, it can be hard to make sure, like, did I actually hear that right or not? Being able to involve another leader would be helpful on that, but I don't know if that's allowed. Like, where does the confidentiality with the child, like, where does that extend? Because like if they're telling you in confidence, can I, like if it's me, can I go to one of the other VBS workers or whoever?
Well, that's where you would have to get their consent to take and say, hey, can we talk about this with somebody else, bring a second person in, would be
And honestly, if they go into a panic, that might be your final red flag right there. You know, because there's so much shame that can get wrapped up in it.
yeah. There are so many ways that some of these things, it's difficult to take and cover everything in one's. The only time you would not, I would have said, be able to ask the child, hey, can we talk about this with another individual, is if that individual is alleged to have been part of the abuse. Which is why it talks about if the village missionary is the alleged perpetrator, the rest of the church board is told, and the district representative for village missions, so that you can't talk to the village missionary about it, but you talk to the rest of the leadership about it because they are the perpetrator. So the only time not to bring someone else in is if you would be bringing in someone perpetrating the abuse, because that's not helpful for them to be able to take and say it in front of their accuser. You know what? That happens if they happens in court, not during this point in time. So we have to be careful with that. All right, any other questions, or are we taking move forward? Yes, Sean. Yeah, wait for the mic. No, you won't be on camera anyway.
So I am sorry, but I'm with the school, err on the side of caution. And if I find out about something like that, it's going to be reported, whether or not it's within these walls or it's elsewhere. If that child had enough trust in me to come up and say hi to me at Walmart while I'm shopping there, and ask me or tell me about a situation like that, then I'm going to do what I need to do to report it and make sure that that child is safe because of the trust.
Right.
And it being a ministry, I think that operating on that level of trust, because that child might be afraid of reporting to anybody else but me.
Right. Well, so and that's definitely what I would have said, is that I would encourage, whether you're in volunteering or not, to if you have suspicion of suspected child abuse of one way or another, it needs to be reported. Now, if it happens within these halls or when you're on duty, you don't get to take and choose not to. You are a mandatory reporter at that point in time. If it happens at Walmart or someplace else and all like that, that is your responsibility to take and do. You know, I can't take and require that. The law does not require that. But if it's here while we're on duty, we are required. We don't get, we do not get the leeway of even making that choice if we're on duty. That's what the mandatory reporter is. But it's, all right, one more and then we got to take and move on a little bit. We'll take and deal with
I was just
some
going to say, one thing that's good about understanding the fact that we have to when on the job is that I know that there are folks who will not ever involve authorities for a variety of reasons. So if that's where you're at, of you don't ever want to be the one that has to make that call, then this would be that sign of maybe you shouldn't be on staff.
Yes, that is one of the things when dealing with this. Some people, again, for whatever reason, whatever convictions they have a hard time being a mandatory reporter. That's unfortunately part of what we do. When we're within the church, when we're caring for other children in the church, we have to be able and ready to make that report. All right, next slide. So, again, this goes back to, we'll go back one bit there. We'll just skim through this next section of the worker selection. You guys have already been through all of this. Again, it says be known by the church for 6 months. We need to have a chance to have actually seen someone for that period of time. Doesn't necessarily say they have to have been continuous 6 months. We have some people that come from, they're here only in the winter and they live someplace else for 6 months elsewhere. If we've known them for 6 months, they could fall underneath that 6-month rule because we've known them for 6 months. Because, again, people move. The reason for that 6 months is that we have a chance to observe their character in things not child care related. If they're not trustworthy, if they're not, what does Scripture say? He who is faithful in little can be faithful in much. If they haven't been faithful in the little that we've taken and seen them over the last, 6 months, well, no, we're not going to take and entrust children to them until they can actually show that. It says complete an application, check references. Again, know and agree to the worker guidelines. So whenever you guys do the thing, you'll notice that it says here, I confirm that I have watched the child abuse prevention training video or been in person and agree to the policy set forth so that we're all on that same page. It says check references, criminal background check. My 2 cents worth on criminal background checks is that they are necessary, they're standard practice. They eliminate a fraction of the people that are potential threats to the children. Though I'm not certain of the exact statistic, but something like 10% of people who come into some place to do and are molesters in a ministry setting, maybe 10% wouldn't have passed a criminal background check. The other 90%, they'll pass the criminal background check because they haven't been caught yet. That's kind of how those things roll. So they're necessary. They keep people who know they can't pass a background check from applying. And those background checks can be from multiple different points. Typically, again, those things that are either sexual offenses, certain drug offenses can disqualify someone from working with children. Again, especially where we're at, the kids are a vulnerable population especially in this area. I remember former pastor up in Elfrida. He worked with kids at the high school, things like that. He said, yeah, you know what? They take and have connections. Oh, I'll just take one backpack or whatever over for the over the line. I'll be a mule one time. Well, it never ends up being one time. We have an obligation to make sure that people who have already been down that road are not encouraging them. And again, they're targeted young here. Just in the church parking lot here a few years ago, we had a load car driver that came through our parking lot that then went away, and then he was chased down by Border Patrol. He was 15 out of Douglas. So there are things other than just sexual offenses that do pop up. There are certain things, like say for instance somebody committed theft in their background. Okay, I committed theft 5 years ago, haven't done anything since, but it's going to pop up on my record. Actually, I don't think it would stay on for 25, but it's in the past, all those things. Okay, we could take and put them to work in a ministry context kind of a thing, depending on what comes up on the background check. So it's not that you have to be completely clean, but it depends what's on the background check. And also, if someone doesn't tell you that they have a conviction on their background check and you find it out in the background check, that's usually a red flag for me. If they say, yeah, no, this is going to come up or this could come up when they're giving me the background check, and then something comes up, okay, I know that they're aware about it. They've already informed me about it. If I have to find out in the background check, this is usually a red flag for me. Because, like, you should have told me about this before. I shouldn't be finding this out in the background check. I think that's everything. Again, knowing and agreeing to follow these guidelines, that's important. All right, let's go next. I think we're running behind time. I'm sorry for that. Supervision. This is the biggest thing that we can do to prevent something happening here. 2 risk factors: isolation and accountability. If there's higher isolation, then there's a higher risk. Like we said, not having someone off on their own. If there's lower accountability, there's also a higher risk. This is why we have at least 2. I would love to have at least 3 adults in every location where we have children. I mean, 2 works, but if there's 3, somebody needs to go do something, put out a fire here, what have you, then there's still at least 2. So I like to err for larger accountability. Yes?
This is also a good reminder for y'all that are going to be working. Steve and I do not count as 2 adults if we're the only ones there.
Yes.
Because of being married. So it cannot be a thing where if something comes up, you know, y'all got to ditch and go do something. It's like, oh, it's fine, Steve and Catherine are there. That's not going to work.
No, that doesn't work.
So I'll have to go off and deal with something and one of y'all stay.
As same thing, obviously, for Joy and Sean. According to policy, you guys don't count as 2 adults. You can think about it. We're very spiritual about this. If you're married, the 2 become 1. So you just think about it spiritually that way, as far as the accounting rule. And this is something to also be looking around. Whoever is doing the work may or may not realize that they're out of compliance. So, case in point. So, all right, we are here. We're having a teaching moment in this room. I'm teaching. And I'm focusing and working with these kids right here, sitting down here. And I had, who will we pick on? I had Abigail back there, and she was sitting down she was sitting down there on the couch in the back. Something happens, Abigail has to leave. Okay? I might not realize that Abigail has to leave. So, now theoretically I should. It's amazing what you can take and see from up front. Sometimes what you can't see. So, always be self-regulating that way. If you know that there's, before you leave, I can't leave to do this until somebody else. Now, if we were in this room, so say a child has to go to the bathroom and there's only 2 adults here. And you're like, gee, I don't want to take and send the child down around in the bathroom for a couple of reasons. One, we have an exterior door down that hallway. If you're only here and the child goes around to the bathroom, you don't know that somebody hasn't come in that door or is waiting at that door for a child to come around into that hallway. So yeah, you're going to have to go back there, probably to about where Sean is there, where you're still visible with me, but you can see that hallway, you can see the bathrooms, and check out on those things. So when we come to isolation, sometimes we have to get creative, but we have to be intentional about it. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry to prolong this, but this is actually a real life scenario and kind of a what should be done in this scenario. So we have a group of kids here and 3 kids go off into another room by themselves and there's only 2 adults available supervising.
They can't do that. You have to bring them back.
Well, no, I was going to say, how do you go and bring them back without splitting up the adults?
So the first thing is you know there's not an adult over there, you don't let them leave the room to begin with. So there's the possibility. This is where, when you are a volunteer worker, you'd like to be your friend, you like to be friendly with them and all like that, but you don't let them leave in the first place. That's the first way to take and prevent that, is not have them leave in the first place. Because then you're not, you can take and say, yeah, and they're like, but Miss Joy, I really want to take and go over there. I need to go over there. Okay, that's fine. But you're not released. You have to take and stay. Yes. Again, if you're on duty.
Okay, the context of this
Okay.
was our teen helpers. It's the teen helpers who took off. And according to the policy, teen or minor helpers are considered by policy to be students.
Well,
they are not
they're
actual
still
staff.
minors, yeah.
So how do we communicate? Like, basically, there's maybe this is something we're going to need to address in a team meeting or something about
Yeah.
the fact that even though they are leaders, they are still student leaders, which means that they are not actually in their own custody. Is that the word? That's not the word, but you know what I'm saying. So that's the context of this question. It's not kids, it's the teens who are still minors.
Yeah, we have to take and figure out a way to split and to take and work with the adults before that happens. And we do have to take, this is where I know we say we don't require those under 18 to come to this training. I'm obviously considering next year requiring under 18 to be in the training so that they know that. So that we can at least take and tell them, look, you're not 18. So I can't let you go out there on your own. Do you remember the policy that you actually watched? Things and all like that. But it's hard. It does hamstring us a little bit. Yeah. Ideally, we shouldn't let them leave in the first place.
Have a kid that's rambunctious and just runs right off, and you can't leave. So do we have walkie-talkies that each group can have?
That's a potential That's a potential thing. Typically, we haven't thought of that so much because of the fact that there's usually not that much distance between, but we could. Yes, that would be an acceptable way of basically making aware. This is again, if you don't have enough supervision, enough people, it makes it really, really hard to avoid isolation. And in the case of it's the volunteers, the teen volunteers that are leaving, yeah, that's where accountability comes in. They have to realize that they're accountable to follow the stuff. They're not just here for a fun time themselves, that they have to actually follow those things themselves. All right, one more thing, and then we'll move on to some other potential real life scenarios. This is good. This is why we wanted people to be here, because to work through some of these things.
So it kind of seems, if I'm getting this right, because an adult can't take a child to the bathroom by themselves, because then that's still an adult being alone with a child. And if there's like two adults, then there's leaving another adult out. So 3 would be ideal. However, it seems to actually function the way that it has to do in different scenarios, like a child using the bathroom or kids, teenagers running off or whatever. We actually need 4 adults here.
4 would be the best magic number. So, like if you were to look at Child Evangelism Fellowship, they do good news clubs in the school. And I've talked with them. We thought about doing something in the school. Child Evangelism Fellowship pretty much won't even talk to you about doing a club unless you can produce a core. And they're usually, they're talking about one classroom in the school kind of thing, unless you can produce 4 individuals. And actually, they would prefer 5, because that allows you to always have the 4 individuals there, even when some person's not there. That's one of the reasons why we never did a good news club down at the school. We could never have, we never had interested people to go up to 5. So I'm like, I can't even really pursue this because I don't have. Now, again, like I said, we have 6 people here. 7. Do my math right. Sorry, Sean, you're hiding behind the chair over there for me. Okay, maybe some of those things are optional. Those are some of the things when you have more potential supervision, you can do some of the things. Let's go to the next slide. Again, the goal of all of our supervision is to lower the isolation, increase accountability. One more slide. All right. So this is the child goes to the bathroom by themselves. Like I say, in this room. If you only have 2, we do have bathrooms down there. So you can watch the bathroom, watch the child all the way to the bathroom, and still be invisible here, so that you have, so the person who's back by basically where Sean is, has accountability to whoever's up here to realize they didn't just duck behind that hallway where the other adult can't see them with the child. And the person up here, ideally, yeah, you'd have 4. You'd have multiple ones. I think the plan is at VBS to have basically 2 individuals kind of stationed around where the bathrooms are over there. So that, ideally you're doing games out in the parking lot. Ideally, you have them under supervision out here. You can see them all the way down the parking lot in through those double doors, or you send one there's still connection there, and you know that there's a person on the other side of the double doors, that then you have two people in there. That would be
Yes, that's what we have getting set up for VBS. I've got someone signed up as bathroom monitor who is just going to sit there so that basically, even though we don't have enough bodies to always have two people walking a child somewhere, there's the line of sight that by the time, person escorting the child, say, from games to the bathroom gets to the bathroom, the line of sight has already transferred from the game director to the bathroom monitor. There is never a moment where there's going to be an adult with a kid without another adult within line of sight.
right.
And that's the best we've been able to do.
And so that's why you would have three out here. They have line of sight, the person in there, then you have the person inside line of sight there. The other thing about supervision, isolation, these things and all like that, these risk factors, is we should always know where the children are, where the leaders are at all times. When it comes out, you'll see me occasionally do it. You'll see other people do it. Yeah. Anyway, where you're counting, you'll see me count number of children at times. Okay, I started out with 8. I still have 8 to make sure. What happened to I only have 7. There's a problem. Right, but somebody that's always dedicated to that and say, wait, there's only 7. Oh, that person went with so-and-so to do that. So say I'm running games out here. My back's turned to the 2 helpers that are out here. They see a child needs to go. I come back around. I look up. There's only 7 kids. There were supposed to be 8. I should be able to ask my fellow leader, where'd the other, I only see 7. I saw 8. They should be able to take and tell me, if I ask them, that other child went with so-and-so to do to the bathroom, and then they're going to be coming right back, kind of a thing, so that they know where the child is that's not there. Okay, that's part of being engaged. Yes?
On the question of how can you reduce risk,
Uh-huh.
one thing that we are going to be doing during VBS, this wouldn't count for Awana, but Awana's done for the year anyway. These
Coming up sooner than we'd like.
Yeah. These bathrooms are going to be closed off. So there's only going to be, instead of the 4 possible places to go, there's only going to be the bathrooms on the other side.
Right.
Because that's the other thing, too, is limiting the options of places to go also increases the accountability, because at that point, if someone is not where they are supposed to be, there's that red flag, and you can minimize the risk just by minimizing the locations.
That's also
is what we're gonna
the
do.
point of oftentimes, and we need to kind of think through more, limiting what doors are unlocked. What I do want to take and work through and upgrade our lock sets to something that is, you don't lock it from the inside. It can be locked outside, but not necessarily, so it's still there for an emergency exit if necessary. So that we could take and have that door locked from the outside, or the kitchen door locked from the outside, so that we could have this door locked from the inside, so that we know the only way that someone comes in and out of into the church is through the double doors down there. Or in the case of Awana, oftentimes I won't unlock those doors necessarily. Sometimes they're already unlocked and I forget. That's a problem. I need to do a better sweep to begin with. So I know if someone's coming in when we're having Awana, they have to come in through these doors. So even if a kid runs ahead of me, I at least know there were only these number of people in the building, and nobody else came in through those doors. That's another way to deal with it, is not having unmonitored access points to the building. Our building's pretty small. If you had a bigger building, there would be more difficulties in access points than we do. But we still have 4 exterior doors. 5 exterior doors. We don't need all 5 to be unlocked, opening, and using for something that we're having with kids. You know, if we can get it down to just 2 or 1, that helps to eliminate that risk. Yeah, David.
Also, another idea too is every volunteer going to have a T-shirt? I think it'd be good if we had a T-shirt or something. Well, T-shirt would be best. A certain bright color, so all the kids, when they're introduced at the very beginning, that they know all these people are workers, and anyone who doesn't have a T-shirt is not a worker.
We will specifically have name tags, and there, we have some identifying marks. It might not be a full T-shirt this year, but there will be.
It's train themed, so we have conductor hats and name tags. We were kind of running out on budget. If we want to add the T-shirt as well, if you think that would be a good thing to add to it, then we can make it happen. But yeah, they will definitely be identified as the staff.
You know, that's a thing that they talk about, like within Awana, having the Awana shirts, the leader shirts, and we take and say, well, it's nice to have that when staff is identifiable because we know who to make it. Anybody who walks in knows who's accountable. I mean, name tags are good too.
Something that would go along with the train theme. At the concert that I volunteered at, all of us volunteers wore a just a fluorescent vest, like a road worker wears, which train employees wear, and those are dirt cheap to pick up.
Yeah. That might be a good
a dozen.
Yeah. So. All right, we're going to take and go one more slide through. So I really do want to get you guys out of here in less than 2 hours because it's almost been almost 2, and I apologize for that. This is another thing that comes up. Youth workers volunteer to drive 5 children home in their personal vehicle after a Saturday night event. What do we got for risk on that? Yeah, you only have 1 adult. So as we do it here, if someone is on duty as a youth worker, okay, we cannot have, you know, you have churches here, churches have like a bus ministry picking up kids and all like that. If you have 2 adults, okay, you could do something like that. If you only have 1, you've put kids in isolation on the roads out here because it's not even like that many people are going to pass your vehicle out here. That being said, maybe a fair number of Border Patrol people and all like that, but they're not necessarily looking for that per se. Yes?
Okay, here's one. Some of our teen helpers are also drivers. And they hang out together and they do stuff together all the time. Like if Kian and Alex are going to like drive home together. Here's Alex's guardian saying, "Oh yeah, it's totally fine." They're going to do it throughout the week anyway. Are we under any kind of compulsion to not allow that because they're leaving VBS?
So in the case of those volunteers, so to speak, we cannot coordinate that that's going to happen as long as they have permission from guardians.
Okay, so that's a guardian permission issue, not a church policy issue.
Correct. In this
Okay.
case, it's the same thing. So a parent came. So if you change this from one of the youth workers to just a parent of a child, that, well, for instance, we had at least 1 or 2 people last year at VBS. They brought children not their own. They brought their own children and their friend. In that case, the guardian of the child that's coming has said, I allow you to take and ride with this person to get there. So the guardian that we have is the person who brought them. Therefore, and if they filled out their parental permission form slip properly, they said that this person can pick up the child. Once we release them to the person that they're picking up the child, if a parent wants to take different other kids home, we don't have control over that, nor do we have specific liability for that. But if they're a worker, that gets a little bit more sticky.
So basically, we just don't arrange rides. So like,
We don't arrange rides.
Our teen can drive you home. We just can't
Right.
do that.
Okay, so that being said, then is it a requirement or should it be a requirement if a worker, or not a worker, sorry, if an adult comes and brings other children that are not their own and they're not the guardian of, should there be, or is there a requirement for a note from the guardian?
I would always like to take and send one back. So typically, that's why our permission forms say parent or a guardian. That's implied consent of a guardianship. We can only deal with what we have. I have sent permission slips home to be filled out by, later, basically send them home of, hey, I want to make sure that we have one from your parent for tomorrow. Okay, this works for today. This is the person you came with. This is the only person we know, especially maybe we don't know their parent. But by tomorrow, let's send this back, and you tell the guardian, get this filled out by their parent, for tomorrow. Now they can put a thing that we can release them to you. I have done that. So it's a tough thing. One thing that has been mentioned as a possibility for this situation, two minds of it, they have dash cams that will also record the vehicle. So if you were in a situation where this had to be done, you would need to have a vehicle turn in the recording so that you no longer have custody of the recording. The church has custody of the recording of what exactly went on. Now, that would not be, I'm saying that's a way that someone might deal with the situation. I'm not saying that's the best way.
To ask a friend to be your passenger until you drop off every child.
The best way would be, like I say, in a van ministry, to have 2 approved adults in the vehicle at all times. And just not do it if you only have one. Again, you have accountability and there's not isolation with, so treat it like a classroom. If you don't have 2 people to go into the classroom, they can't just like open the door going down the road, and all like that. Treat it like a classroom with no window.
We strap the kid on the roof.
No, that causes other legal issues. Point being, but treat it like a classroom. You have to have 2 people. All right, let's go one more. If we have 2 people that would be willing to take and run it, now it's interesting. Almost every school bus that exists, most of the time you'll see they only have 1 school bus driver. However, you will also note there are cameras on that bus. All over that bus. So, again, that's how the school districts do it. I think a second person is better than a camera, but because they act in the time, the camera can only react to something after you see the footage. Again, so again, that's always the best point. Now, there was talk about with VBS of having some of the kids head up to do something at the shop in Tombstone and all like that. That would be a separate permission slip event thing. It might be connected with VBS, but we'd have to figure out a whole other logistics run for that. Yes. People are going to take and say, wow, you have like an hour and a half, 2 hours of video and all like that. Oh
It's
my
all
gosh.
quick.
You should have been here. It was great. Now you have to take and watch it all and sit there for 2 hours.
The easiest way to do a field trip like that would be send out a permission slip the first day and have that be a last day event, and have, well, I mean, I could borrow my grandma's bus van thing and I can seat like 8 people, and then we can also take a second car. Every car has at least 2 adults,
Right,
and that would be the easiest way to go to and from.
right. You know, it's where you have that whole thing. You will come up with new things if you were to go to Tucson, or Tombstone, I should say, or Tucson for that matter. But then you have a whole thing of how do you take and contain children through the streets of Tombstone. I mean, not saying that, huh? You know, that's an option. That is an option. So basically, the point is, and we're not going to take and figure out all those plans here, whenever you have something, you have to evaluate in each individual action, what are the risks here? What do I need to do to mitigate those risks so that we're not just doing it because it's fun, sounds cool, what have you. We have to take and see, what do I have to pre-plan? Because there are so many things that would be like, oh, this would be really cool to do. Yeah, but I can't actually do it safely, so I can't do it. I'm going to hit real quick here the response plan, reporting procedure, and then I think we'll probably be done. Again, the reporting procedure, it's in the policies. Make sure you read it. Remember that whoever's speaking for the church is speaking for the church. Another thing, don't deny or minimize the situation. You may not be able to talk to anybody about details, but you can't say, oh, no. Don't minimize it. Because for somebody, especially if something, God forbid, did happen, the last thing we want to take and say as a church is to take and say it didn't happen. We don't blame the victim or the family, and we keep accurate records. This is why every time we'll have a registration, we'll know who was here, who wasn't here, when they came, when they left. Best of our abilities that way. Again, some of this is so that somebody says, well, Pastor Steve did this on this day at this time. It's easy to take and say, well, no, Pastor Steve wasn't there at this point in his time. He checked out, he was gone. Or whoever it might be, to take and say, no, they were there, and they were only in this spot. They were not in other locations. We have that accountability. To take, no, okay, whatever happened, this is what we know didn't happen because we have it, and we have it on record of what happened, or who was where when. That's why checking in, both for kids and leaders, is important.
So
All
then
right.
another question comes up about keeping accurate records and checking in. Are parents required to check in if they're going to be at the VBS also?
I would say that we probably will add that to our form this year so that we can take and say, because if there's a accusation against a parent being here, and again, ideally, we'll have supervision in all these locations, but knowing, yeah, we had a parent here from this time to that time.
So basically, just a record of all bodies on the premises.
Yes. All right, next slide. And next slide too, I guess. All right, keep on moving. We've already talked about most of this. Again, basically security, all these different things, safety. church is already dealing with it. We're dealing with it one of two ways. We're either dealing with it proactively or retroactively. Proactively is when we try and prevent things from being in place. Retroactively is we try and fix the dumpster fire after it happened. So we are always going to try and be proactive in how we're going to deal with these problems so that we head it off before it happens. Because if it's after it's happened, yeah, I think we did like at VBS last year, like a check-in or a debrief meeting every day. It's one of the reasons why we do that, because if there's a problem, we don't want to take and learn about it at the end of the week if we could do something at the beginning of the week. Next slide. Yes.
Do you have something planned? Like, let's say somebody, let's say, I don't want Jane or me, or we have a heart attack, and there's chaos. Or there's a big accident, there's chaos, and you can lose track.
Right.
Your mind. So is there is there a procedure where you rile all the kids, get all the kids in one room real quick, or?
I'm going to have Catherine answer that because she's more VBS.
Yeah, that's my department. So I am assigning certain workers that no matter what, they never leave the group of kids. So that will be part of, we're going to be having a VBS meeting where we detail everyone's role. We're going to also have active shooter plans in place as well as fire drills in place that the staff will all work with. We did a little bit of this last year. We're going to do a better job of it this year. Last year, Caden helped us a lot with that. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Of coming up with some of those plans. So it will also involve, yes, something of that nature. The people that are assigned to stay with the kids no matter what, they're going to have the instructions more specifically. And no offense, but it's the younger one that's going to be the one on. So now, that being said, right now there's only one. I still have to get a second person for that job.
Also, we do have to present plans for this of what happens if this happens. Where are we going to take and go? And a lot of that will be covered individually, event by event, of, okay, who calls 911, where do kids go as a safe spot. Yeah. Well, exactly. Some of those plans are event by event. But you're right, they have to be thought of. Worst case.
So if someone's designated to do something in the like I'm supposed to stick with all the kids, but in the event that something like that happens, because depending on what people know or who's qualified to take care of what situations, would there be like a tag out system?
You're talking about like someone else taking over your job with the kids because of dealing.
Yeah, well, because okay, that was my question.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay. I just wanna
As
make sure
callous as
because
that
some
seems,
Okay. Because
as callous as that seems, that's true. You let the kids die, or I should say, not let the kids
do
die.
not let the kids die.
Well,
no,
that's the question.
'cause
You're gonna
I
let the kids
know-
die, or the other person?
Well, I know in some instances, like people might have anxiety attacks, but I can't do this. Like, switch with me. So I needed to make sure I knew what I was supposed to do in a situation like that.
No.
Okay, cool.
I mean, in a way, our first priority is to the kids. So,
And yes, it is different. It is different when you do CPR on the testing dummy and when you do CPR on someone you know. Been there, done that. Not fun. Again, this is more about that whole thing of an active shooter, somebody coming in. Again, we're not going to have non-parents, guardians or people on the property. Now, if somebody comes in, we ask them to not be there. And if they don't leave, CCSO will take and come and help us with that if absolutely necessary. I mean, I hate to take and say that, but some of those things we just have to do that, or we take and change what we're doing. We have to be flexible to take and change with what's going on. If it's monsoon outside, we're not doing games outside.
Another question then, if some parents came in or somebody came in and they're not supposed to be in there, and we're all supposed to be at our stations, who's going to go and if we had a walkie-talkie, we'd call who? You or someone who's supposed to be doing that?
Probably the first call would probably be to Catherine since she's directing. Hopefully she's not actually with any specific kids, so she can be responding to that. Yeah. Yeah, so again, we will have those things. Some of those things will come up in our true VBS meeting as well, but they are things that we'll have to think of and work through that. All right, let's. I think that's just about it. The thing. So again, we just have to always be watch. As much as we're trying to have fun with the kids, we're also perpetually suspicious of things that don't seem quite right. It's a hard balance, but you have to be suspicious of something that doesn't seem quite right. All right, let's keep on going. Again, these can happen. This is especially, active shooter type things. All these things can happen. If you know somebody's having a hard time, God forbid it happens, there's a custody issue. And you know that there's a protection order or a restraining order or what have you. If that person shows up, or you have to be ready. If that person shows up that's in the middle of that, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? All right, let's keep on moving.
Well, mostly just kind of a funny thought, but for events of stuff like that, we should get Shawnette for security. She's cool.
So, yeah. Technically we only have one person actually trained in active shooter security situations. That's actually Jeff. But I don't know that he's necessarily going to be available for some of these things. But he also may know where, if some people want to get trained in how to do this, there are trainings that happen even in Douglas area for those things. Again, with all of this, if we're having to respond to something, it's the second best option. Best option was to prevent it in the first place. Again, we'd already talked about isolating the facility, secure, control places where the children are, things like that. Let's keep on moving. Obviously, call CSSO.
yes, and we will have a designated 911 caller.
Exactly. Who will call? Make sure it's someone who can give, all the information there. So, keep on moving. All right. I say question or comments. We've already done a bunch of questions or comments throughout. All right. I think, oh gosh. we're not even going to take and do this. This we've already discussed about the like we talked about. If it's an activity, we have to monitor it, supervise it. We don't just take and go with what all the different things.
Oh,
We
and
don't
you
just
did one of those, the weekend hike.
Yeah, and that was not an official church activity, though.
Oh, you still had your 2 adults though.
Well, I did. In that case, I knew that I didn't know the trail that I was going on, but I knew someone that did. I got someone who did, who had the first aid kit, all the different things and all like that. I had a few things. But anything that you do, you have to evaluate how much supervision do I need for this type of event. We can't just plan something and go ahead with it. We have to plan it and determine what's the risk. What are we going to do? Keep on going. Keep on going. Again, when we do all these different activities, we have to have plans in place.
Yeah, this is what David just asked about.
Yeah, we have to take and get all of these things set up. We're not going to do it all today, but all these things will have to be set up. That's why we have the VBS meeting previous to. Also, again, if an activity becomes dangerous, we have to take and adjust. We did have to do this during VBS last year when there was a monsoon storm. It started out, it was okay, it was a ways away. It became closer, we had to take and go inside because we had some lightning strikes. They weren't dangerously close yet, but they were on their way there. So we have to take and keep on. All right, keep on going. Keep on going. That's the last thing? Good. I thought there was another slide, but that's okay. It's okay. This is good. Thank you guys for suffering through all of this with us. Don't forget to take and sign the papers, to take and say that you're here, because otherwise, if if we don't have a paper that's signed that we're here, we might have to take and do it all over again. And I told you, nobody wants to take and do this all over again. So make sure you sign both papers before you leave.
And then you won't have to do it till next year.
Then we don't have to do it again until next year.